And now there's another idea for our bridges. It's privatize the plan. Yeah, the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity has come up with yet another model to be able to attack the challenges we have with our infrastructure, namely the bridges and that whole toll plan that's driving everybody crazy, except for Gina Raimondo, who seems to like it so much, and Nick Mattiello, who's moving toward it. But Mike Stenhouse is here to argue for another plan, somewhat different from the Republican plan, which is a pay-as-you-go plan. So stay tuned for that, and we'll dig into it. More brain power. We need a lot of brain power on that particular issue. How are you? Thank you for tuning in My State of Mind. I am Dan Yorke. Let's go to the rundown because there's a lot on our mind here this evening. We've got a lot going on. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think they laid a glove on her. The headline so far, now we record our program, don't tell anybody, but this is not live. We record the program in the late afternoon, and I spent most of the morning watching the Benghazi hearings today. I have a radio show, weekdays noon to 3, where I was distracted and didn't get a chance to watch them. So I'm playing catch up, but I've seen a lot of the hearings already, and so far, I don't think if the Republicans wanted to get her, and that was the intent, they say it wasn't, except Representative McCarthy certainly kind of said so a couple of weeks ago. Representative Gowdy, who's running the thing, says, no, that's not the intent. But if it was the intent, not so far.
Hillary Clinton greeted members of a special House committee before facing tough questions about the deadly attacks at a U.S. compound in Benghazi, Libya.
I'm here to honor those we lost and to do what I can to aid those who serve us still.
This is the third time Clinton has testified on Capitol Hill about the attacks. Once again, she accepted responsibility for security lapses in Benghazi.
Before I left office, I launched reforms to better protect our people in the field and help reduce the chance of another tragedy happening in the future.
So Chairman Trey Gowdy tried to establish the legitimacy of this hearing process and talked about the timetables and the delays in getting the information they needed in order to facilitate a good conversation with Hillary. And then Minority Leader Cummings, who's the co-chair, the minority chair, more or less, just dumped all over the hearings saying they were a sham. And I will tell you that as I watched the play-by-play of this whole thing, Hillary Clinton had answers for all the security issues and took the hit and the responsibility for some of the security mistakes and laid out the reforms. And frankly, if anybody was watching it from an objective point of view, you would say that she was faring fairly well and being pretty calm, cool, and objective about the whole thing. What I didn't get to see, and it may come out over the news cycle, is whether or not this whole phony story about the video inspiring the attacks on Benghazi on that terrible day on September 11, 2012, how that story came up and who's ultimately responsible for that phony baloney. That's the only thing that's going to hurt her politically, that's for sure. But it does seem to me that there's no there so far. Next item. There's going to be a lot of there here, though. 38 hearings. Now, just yesterday, Ken Block, who's running a whole big program to get people to pepper the legislators to demand hearings, commented on that very effort last night.
The way you get elected leaders to do things that they don't want to do is you have to put pressure on them. We're asking individuals to go to the website and launch an email at these elected leaders, insisting on two things: subpoena-based legislative hearings about 38 studios. We want people under oath. We also believe that we need to have an independent governor's investigation, someone performing that investigation outside of the sphere of political influence in Rhode Island, to tell us the truth about what happened with 38 studios.
It was coming out yesterday, and lo and behold, here's a headline you see in the Providence Journal, and this blows my mind. This hearing headline and the story itself, it came out on page A7 of the Providence Journal today. A7? Now, Nick Mattiello, the Speaker of the House, was complaining about, front page stories hurting the economy of the state and everything else. Oh, did they drink the grape juice at the Providence Journal? This is a profound decision. Next Tuesday at 4:30, the hearings begin, and Karen Macbeth, pictured here, will be the chairperson, reporting, of course, to Nick Mattiello the chair. And what I'd like to see, or the Speaker of the House, what I'd like to see is gutsy Karen McBeth show the ultimate courage and say, look, we're going to subpoena every single legislator who voted for the loan guarantee program that enabled this debacle to occur with Curt Schilling's company. All 113 ballpark representatives and senators, and ask them what they knew, how they knew it, when they found out Curt Schilling was involved, and begin by inviting the Speaker of the House to be the first woman, person, excuse me, to under oath offer testimony. Now he'll say, I ain't doing that, and then she can say, well, then I'm not chairing the hearings. So she wins either way. We need some courage and we need some drama with these hearings, not for ratings, not for television shows and radio shows, but for the attention of the people so that we understand there's finally a moment when people are held accountable. Only then, if we have a real hearing process that has some kind of metal and comes up with penalties for people, either court of public opinion or criminal, real resolve as to what actually happened, and real reform so it doesn't happen again. Until we get those things in dramatic fashion, we're not going to be able to get this thing off the front page, unless, of course, Nick Mattiello is buying the Journal editorial people, a beer and burying everything on page A7. Wow. Corrupt grants, speaking of the Speaker. He's got himself in a little bit of a jackpot. Here's Ted Nesi's WPRI.com headline. So this legislative grant program that I've been banging on for the last 15 years is the most corrupt $2.2 million we have in the taxpayer auspice. And what it's about here is simply this. We get legislators who put their, no, forgive me, their knee pads on, figuratively, and kneel down in front of the leadership, figuratively, and ask for money for the Little League and the Johnny Cake Center and the Hockey League and blah, 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 blah. So that when they get their $500 and $700 and $1,000 and $1,500 and $2,000 checks to bring back to their districts, they get that cheesy little picture in the weekly newspaper that says, see, I brought some stuff back, and the dopey constituents think that they got the juice. When really all they're doing is being bought off by the Speaker to do his bidding on the big stuff that matters to him. Same thing on the Senate President's side. Well, guess what? Speaker Mattiello got a little jammed up here because he brought some bacon home to the Cranston Hockey League, and then the Hockey League decided to thank him by putting his name on the shirts that they gave to the hockey kids. That's not good. There should be no personal benefit, marketing-wise or anything else, for a legislator for bringing taxpayer money anywhere. And Brandon Bell, the GOP chairman, kind of made the point in a press release and some audio.
This is not about assaulting youth hockey or any of these organizations. I mean, really, the purpose of the press release, what got your attention, obviously, was the use of legislative grant. But we're talking about a very bad 3 days for the Speaker.
Yeah, on all sorts of fronts. But here's the thing. This is almost less about the Speaker and more about us, because all of us have been chomping at the bit. So many organizations in this state just want and want more and more and more grant money. Can I have it for my project? Can I have it for my... And it's taxpayer money that's indiscriminately and with all sorts of power leverage just spewed out based on who's doing what bidding for the Speaker. And then you get these thank yous. Look at this. This is the North Providence West Little League, just an example that was sent to me. If you read on the bottom, you got a thank you to Representative O'Brien for $3,000. Thank you to Senator Chacon for $1,500. But they don't deliver that money personally. You know what they have to do to get that money? Fall in line for all the big stuff? Stop asking for the grants. They're corrupt. Thank you. I don't mean to yell at you, but I mean to yell at you. All right, here's a good thing. The governor is reviewing the education funds as we speak. Headline from yesterday's exercise, the school funding formula does have to be revisited, as she well pointed out.
Too many of our schools, especially in our cities, are falling apart. It's not fair to the teachers, not fair to the students. So there's a list. The Department of Education has gone through a long process. Like I said, they prioritize the worst schools first. The work is done. The money is there. Let's just get it done.
Look, it's a complicated situation, and what we really have is a crisis right now between traditional public schools and charter public schools, and it's got to be fixed by keeping and growing charter public schools. We'll see how it works out. And finally, he's been all over the place. Here's the headline in the Providence Journal. Yep, London, Mayor Lorza, the traveling mayor, he was in Guatemala, and then he went to China. Here he is with his innovation director at City Hall talking about their trip to London. I got a good idea. Maybe he ought to travel to the south side and the east side and the Mount Pleasant section and a couple other places and figure out how to solve some problems in this place called the City of Providence that he is the mayor of. Thank you. Your point of view is important. 228-1886. State of mind at myritv.com. All that kind of thing. Here's what Damon posted on Facebook. What? You want to hold state reps accountable? How dare you, Dan? Don't you know these people who they work for? Certainly not you or me. Damon, not even funny. I don't find it funny anymore. I'd rather have you putting the heat on than making sarcastic jokes. Maybe it's just the way I am today. We'll be right back with Mike Stenhouse. Privatizing bridge repairs. Stay with us. All right, so we're trying to figure out how to toll the roads. No, we're not. We're trying to figure out how not to toll the roads. Here's the latest headline. Now the Speaker of the House is inclined to go with the governor on the toll finance plan, which is horrifying. And then we've got another idea here we pop up. And this is the P3, a compelling delivery model for governor's proposed infrastructure upgrades from the Freedom and Prosperity Institute here in Rhode Island, which is as wonky as it gets. The P3.
Do I look like a wonk?
Huh? You know, when I first met you, you didn't. When I first met you, you looked like an old athlete. You used to throw some pretty good fastballs and breaking balls for the Red Sox. Now, you look like a wonk.
Okay.
All right? Well, that's what you want to be,
That's
right?
not good,
That's
no.
your policy. You say policy, you say want. You want to privatize the roads and bridges? No. So let's follow this.
Sure.
The governor wants to toll. She wants to create a $500 million base principal project to fix the bridges. She's going to borrow that much over 30 years on top of it to pay for it. So it's a $1.1 billion finance plan. Yikes. She introduced the whole plan, and now they're backfilling the facts and diligence around it, we see. The Republicans come up and say, hey, listen, we should pay as we go and not borrow all that money. And I kind of like that. And now you've thrown a new idea into the mix, which is to privatize the project.
All right, so let me break it into three pieces. The scope of the project, we, the Republicans, the governor, we agree. We need to fix our bridges and roads. It should be a problem. The second piece is how to fund it. Do we fund it with tolls or do we fund it with the pay-go model that the Republicans talk about? We tend to agree with the Republican plan. The third piece is who's going to be the general contractor? Who are we going to give that money to? We say, let's not give it to the troubled Department of Transportation with all their record of inefficiencies and cronyism, and as we've seen in the headlines recently, violating Clean Water Act rules. Let's give that money through an open bidding process to a private sector contractor who will raise their own financing, who will hire their own subcontractors and do their own procurement and deliver the project in a much low cost and less risky way. This is a model that has worked in many, many other states.
I don't get it. All
right.
So,
We raise the money, let's say it's from tolls.
yeah.
We would give it to Department of Transportation. Here's $500 million, go do it.
Why are you back to tolls?
Well, however, it could be from a pay-go plan, but wherever, like I said, it doesn't matter where the funding comes from. Who do we give it to be the general contractor to upgrade it?
Yeah, I don't get what the benefit is. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't get the
Well,
benefit.
if you look at the benefits throughout the country, in Pennsylvania, for instance, they delivered the bridge repairs for a very similar project, 33% lower cost, 3 years instead of 10 years, and they did it without any risk of any cost overruns being pushed back on drivers
How did
or
it happen? How?
because with a guaranteed revenue flow from toll revenues or pay-as-you-go revenues, it's a contract. With those guaranteed revenues, the private contractor goes out and handles everything else, and they can do it much more efficiently than the government can. Do you dispute that?
I don't know how to dispute that or not dispute that. I understand that the governor has pointed out some real structural inefficiencies in our own DOT. I get that. So they're reworking the DOT at this point. I'm very disappointed with the new leadership of the DOT that they're backfilling their actual diligence on the toll plan idea. So So far, I'm not impressed by whatever progress is well intended as it may be. So I can't defend the DOT yet, but I can't figure out why giving everything to a private contractor, we've had a lot of trouble with contractors, makes any sense. I'm not arguing, I'm asking, I don't get it.
Well, all I can say is this, we've studied this to the point where we know that it's been used dozens and dozens of times by other states, that it saves money, it saves time, and it removes risk on taxpayers.
Well,
Do any of us expect that this project won't turn into a big dig type cost overrun? With the private sector, they're contractually guaranteed, they assume the risk. If there's cost overruns, they eat it. They do not have the right to come back to taxpayers or drivers or to the new tolling authority.
All right, so they get a fixed amount of money.
That's right, guaranteed revenue
and
stream.
what prevents them from shaving expenses and not providing everything that's been promised if they get into cost overruns?
Well, the Rhode Island Department of Transportation would still have an oversight role, an inspection role, and all that. Sure, they would kind of be the oversight committee, but we're basically general contracting the whole thing to the private sector instead of to a troubled government agency. And again, this is not, we're not making it up.
Would the contractors who would bid on a publicly administrated project be the same that would take a private role? Are they the same kind of players?
Well, a general contractor would bid, and that could be an in-state entity, it could be an out-of-state entity. We've even suggested you might put in language that whoever the general contractor is, they would have to hire local firms, but they'd get to hire them on their own terms, not according to the existing high-priced, bloated contracts that we normally give out.
Meaning the labor options that they have?
Yes, labor, procurement, everything else, right. Materials procurement.
So you think a private contracting option would exempt those contractors from the current union prevailing wage issues?
There's two levels of cost savings. One, just private sector efficiencies and innovation, execution, and procurement. The second level, which we suggested, it doesn't have to be part of it, but we suggested, is for state level exemptions from prevailing wage, from PLAs, and from minimum apprentice and other laws like that that we know drive up costs another 15% or so.
So summary, labor would be cheaper.
Right.
Administrative costs would be less.
Procurement more efficient.
Procurement defined as, for everybody.
Buying all the materials and things you need to conduct the project outside of labor.
And the budget would be guaranteed because it's a contracted budget.
Right, that's a contract.
But we have contracts with contractors even in the public domain. The DOT administrates.
Right.
And then there's all sorts of adjustments that are made based on how a project is ahead or behind schedule.
But in this case, it's a DOT. In the case you said, it's the DOT administrating it. And if the costs come back, they just go back for more money from the taxpayer. In our scenario, a public-private partnership, it's a private sector contractor who's general contracting. They then hire, and there is no mechanism for them to come back to taxpayers or drivers for more money.
So they assume the risk of actually losing money on a project?
It's a competitive
and
bid process.
And what does the history tell us about, how many of those kinds of private contracting arrangements end up with either a project not completed or a company losing money and not reinvesting enough, blah, 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 right? I mean, this is a huge, huge deal.
So here's our position on that. That's a good question. I can't answer that. We're clearly not P3 experts or finance experts, but we know this is a model that's worked. We're putting it out there so that we can ask these questions in a public forum. Instead, what we've gotten, for something that could offer this many benefits, we've been systematically ignored and swatted away, and that's something I'd like to talk to you about a little later in this show.
All right, well, we better hurry up and come back and talk about being swatted away. Stay with us. All right, well, we're being swatted away. The Center for Freedom and Prosperity and this private contract bridge repair plan called P3. And what are you referring to? That no one's paying attention to you? I am.
Thank you.
I want people to hear. I want a zero-based start to this thing again.
We think
we all agree we need to fix bridges, but my gosh, we are so far apart on everything else.
We put forth an incredible idea, well-researched, that has enormous potential benefits for the people of Rhode Island. and yet our political leaders don't want to hear it. So over the years, what we've noticed with our center, there's what we call a policy elitism going here. If you're not part of the insider class, we don't care what you have to say, no matter who you are. I had a conversation on a different topic this morning with Representative Karen McBeth, who chairs the 38 Studios House Oversight. She said the most refreshing thing I've ever heard, and let me tell you what she said in contrast to what I just said, the policy elitism. She said, Mike, I'm happy to work with your group and the other groups. I'm happy to have the media report on this. I'm happy to have the public weigh in. I'm happy to work with other lawmakers so we can get to the bottom of this. We can discover the truth, and we can do what's in the best interest of Rhode Island. Now compare that to the elitism we're getting from the Speaker and the Governor and others. You're not one of us. We don't want to hear it. Since when is the voice of the taxpayer not relevant when it comes to their elected officials?
Or which taxpayer? See, I think the voice of the
Or the
taxpayer.
voter.
I think the voice of the taxpayer and the voters like this. I don't think anybody's saying anything about this toll plan. We get faulty questions in polls. Which would you prefer, tolls or gas tax increases? Hey, how about neither? And a reprioritization of an $8.7 billion budget to pay as you go. Now, your private plan is something that I think is an interesting add-on to the conversation. We don't have, I hear what you're saying. Look, I'm going to include you in every public policy conversation because you guys work hard and think on it. That you don't seem to be getting any traction with the Speaker and the Governor is your challenge.
It's more than a challenge. Governor Chafee said on Roadmap Rhode Island, if he wants to say something, he should run for office. Governor Raimondo referred to us as people. The Speaker says groups who want to remain relevant. That is insultingly dismissive.
Well, you're
and
right.
we don't accept it.
Well, then you know what you should do? You should get more aggressive about those kinds of things because the only thing they know is smash mouth football.
That's right.
That's the
Well, so, I have started a C4 organization that can start to play a little football.
Yeah, well, I think you probably should to support the thinking that you're doing because no one's inviting you. You're not invited to the party.
Well, we don't want to be an insider. We just want our ideas discussed. That's
Well,
all.
you know what? You got to put your toe in the inside water in order to affect it. There's nothing wrong with being on the inside if you are earnest.
That's right.
You know, so we got to start. Actually, this is a bigger conversation. I think we got to start redefining terms. As far as Karen McBeth is concerned, I think this is a pivotal time for her in Rhode Island with these hearings next week. You got 30 seconds on that because I think every legislator ought to be called for subpoena testimony. I think the House Speaker ought to be the first one, and she ought to switch pitch him and say, you know what, I'm running these hearings. This is how we're going to do it. And if the Speaker pushes back, she should say, you know what, take this chair and shove it, and then we'd have a conversation in the state.
Well, switching to 38 Studios, the chairwoman in my conversation this morning, she said she's very confident that the Speaker will give her what she needs. That
Does she think she needs him to testify? Because he should be the first one to testify. First one.
Didn't ask her about that, but she claimed to me that there's a dramatic difference between when I started this committee a year and a half ago and now. The Speaker wants this out in the open is her claim. We'll see if it happens. So, but her idea of a team approach towards public policy.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I
idea.
see it. But don't shortchange yourself because you and other good government groups have put some significant pressure on that process as well.
And we've achieved a lot of victories. Yeah.
Keep your head up.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us. Hey, tomorrow night, big show, I think. We've got the National Principal of the Year from Cumberland and the Milliken Educator Award, the Pawtucket teacher as well. 2 award-winning educators. Important show Friday. See ya.